Hello everyone, Professor Kurzlik here. So I wanted to make a video about some of the difficulties that the Trump administration is running into with the war in Iran. So in previous videos we talked about American foreign policy and tools of American foreign policy, ways that any U.S. administration can try to shape the happenings of an adversary, try to shape the public policy of any country around the world. And that's through sanctions, diplomacy, coercion, military force. And so when we think about the Iran war, we know last night the Trump administration put a pause on the continued bombing of Iran after 13 days. And so this morning on Meet the Press, on Face the Nation, on the Sunday morning shows, some elected officials were on these programs talking about the Iran conflict, of course. And so we know that we're kind of at this standstill in negotiations. Negotiations fall apart. We hear reports that, progress was made, but then we don't really see that progress. And so this just shows the difficulty of finding a resolution to the conflict. And so one thing that kept occurring on the Sunday shows that news programs are talking about is how unpopular this conflict is. And so that really brings up how domestic politics plays a role in foreign policy, how domestic politics plays a role in international relations. So some recent polling came out that said the support for the war is under 50%. It's oftentimes in the 30% on polls. When people are asked about Donald Trump's handling of the conflict, it's oftentimes in the 30s, low 40s. When people are asked about do they think the war should end, they say yes at over 50%. So we know that in international relations, on foreign policy, domestic politics plays a role. Because the Trump administration, or any administration, previously the Biden, the Obama, George W. Bush administration, can look at these polls and say, okay, well, decisions that we're going to make, how is this going to impact us electorally? So if you're paying attention to the news, we know that we are living in an election cycle. When races are going on, right now we're in the primary, but once we get to the general election, there's concern in the GOP and the Republican Party that if this conflict and if Donald Trump remains unpopular, that could really hurt their chances of defeating Democrats in November. So then how does foreign policy play a role? Well, if the war is unpopular, if more service members are killed, if the price of gas continues to rise, well then that's going to hurt Republicans electorally because they're in power now. So then how does that constrain the Trump administration? Well, the Trump administration is aware of this. They have people that are looking at the polls, taking polls that we don't see in the public, and they can see that the conflict is unpopular. So the decisions that they make, the choices they make, are absolutely constrained by the popularity of the conflict. So even if the Trump administration said, okay, with some ground troops, we could probably take Kharg Island, we could probably take pieces of the Iranian territory that maybe had what Donald Trump calls the nuclear dust, that U.S. service members could capture those areas. Well, when they look at the polls, they see boots on the ground is extremely unpopular. So that is a constraining force in a democracy, and it's a constraining force on the executive. Now, that doesn't mean that the executive couldn't still do something that's unpopular, try to sell it to the American population, try to sell it to people that, hey, we need to do this because X, Y, or Z. But domestic politics thus does play a role in what options a president has. So we hear debates over boots on the ground, and a lot of times, I think there was an article in the Washington Post, New York Times, and Foreign Policy about how unlikely boots on the ground actually are because of the unpopularity of that policy solution. So then an administration is less likely to do it. So we see that domestic politics absolutely plays a role in foreign policy. And so even if Donald Trump, because he's not running again, because he can't run again, is less worried about his political future, the Republican Party themselves are very worried about the midterm elections coming up and already thinking about 2028. Okay, well, if this war remains unpopular, are people going to punish us at the poll? And Democrats will run ads and run their campaign on being against the conflict. So we see that some of the other tools of foreign policy that we talked about, like sanctions, are being discussed. Okay, how do we put sanctions on key Iranian industries that would hurt the regime, that would try to get them to change their behavior? Diplomacy, of course, like we talked about, is absolutely going on behind the scenes. But the big takeaway that I just wanted to talk about is how domestic politics is shaping the Trump administration's foreign policy decisions right now. And we absolutely see it is, because when the war is very unpopular, continuing conflict, rising gas prices, this is putting pressure on the Trump administration and Republicans to maybe not send ground troops, to try to find a pause in the fighting. And the last thing on my little note card that I wrote is about munitions. So there's debate and concern about the quantity of munitions that the United States is using after years of conflict in Eastern Europe and then conflict here in the Middle East. That concern over stockpiles being lower than the administration would like also can shape some of the foreign policy decisions that the Trump administration is making. Thank you.